in the crumbling heart of Eastern Europe, where forests whisper in tongues long forgotten, and castle stones remember the cries of the innocent. There lived a woman cloaked in both nobility and nightmare. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory, Countess Heiress. Monster by candlelight, she was a refined aristocrat. Her skin pale as ivory, her smile gentle, almost motherly. But beneath her silken gowns and the perfume of rosewater, there pulsed a hunger unspeakable. They say she bathed in blood to preserve her beauty, but the truth is far more disturbing. Tonight, we descend into the dungeons of Lactus Castle, where beauty turned to horror, and vanity birthed a legend soaked in crimson. They say Lactus Castle still groans at night, not from wind, nor beast, nor ghost, but from memory. A memory etched into every moss-covered brick, every iron ring still bolted to the cold, damp walls. The castle, perched atop the Carpathian highlands, was once a jewel of nobility. But behind its elegant silhouette lay something rotting, something ancient, something female. Elizabeth was born in 1560 into the powerful family, wealthy, revered, feared. Feared, her uncles were kings, her cousins princes. She herself was destined to marry into yet more power, and at the age of 15, she was wed to Ferenc, a Hungarian war hero known as the Black Knight of Hungary, a man who preferred to decorate his enemies on spikes. The match was political, the affection icy, and Elizabeth, even as a teenager, was different. It's said she suffered from violent seizures as a child. Some called it epilepsy, others called it demonic possession. Servants told of her moods, calm one hour, wrathful the next. One nurse was found with bite marks on her arm. Another disappeared altogether. Whispers spread through the manor like the rustling of dry leaves in a crypt. When Ferenc departed for war, Elizabeth was left in charge of the entire estate. She was no helpless wife. She managed lands, settled disputes, ruled servants. But something's changed. The loneliness of those vast, empty halls seeped into her skin. The mirrors showed her the same reflection every morning, but not the same face. A new crease, a slight shadow, a whisper of age, and then one day blood. A servant girl combing her long, raven-black hair tugged too hard. In fury, Elizabeth struck her in the face so violently the girl's nose bled onto her mistress's hand. Elizabeth paused. She watched the crimson drops slide down her pale fingers. She claimed later that the skin beneath felt younger. That was how it began, not with black magic or ancient curses, but with vanity. And vanity, as the devil knows, is the gate through which all horrors may pass. In the weeks that followed, more accidents occurred. Servant girls slipped, fell, cut themselves. Each time, Elizabeth lingered, transfixed by the sight of blood. Eventually, she stopped waiting for accidents. She began asking for young maids from the surrounding villages. Beautiful ones, virgins, for sewing, they were told, for courtly training. But those girls never returned home. Their families asked questions, and Elizabeth, she smiled. She had built secret chambers beneath the castle. Behind false walls, places where no light reached, and screams were swallowed by stone. At first, it was just her. Later, she had help. A woman named Dorothea Shantess, a former wet nurse with hands like claws and eyes that gleamed like black stones. And to others, Ilona, a former maid, and a hunched manservant named Fichko, whose tongue had been partially cut. They became her court of cruelty. They brought the girls, held them down, watched as the Countess indulged her obsession. She didn't just bathe in blood. She bit them. She burned them. She inserted red-hot irons into their mouths. Some were starved. Others were sewn into dead animals. Many died quickly. Some took days. But always Elizabeth stood above them, watching, admiring, feeding something deep within her soul that no husband, no title, no wealth could ever satisfy. And yet, no one stopped her, because power is its own shield. And castles, after all, are built as much to keep others out as they are to keep the truth in. In the year 1604, Count Ferenc died of illness, perhaps poison. Some say, but no physician dared name it aloud. Elizabeth, now a widow, emerged from mourning, not diminished, but emboldened. Without her husband's shadow, she ruled alone. She no longer needed to veil her desires behind veils of discretion. Her castle became a cathedral of torment, its bricks mortared with terror. The surrounding villages whispered of it. Children vanished. Mothers wept into the soil. Fathers knocked on iron gates and returned home broken, or never returned at all. But who would accuse her? She was a noble, a Bathory, a widow of war. And yet the rumors deepened. It was said Elizabeth kept a black bucca ledger, written in her own hand, of every girl taken, every torment performed. The tally, over 600 names. Some say she believed blood preserved youth. Others say she had gone mad from grief, from loneliness, from the taste of death that Ferenc had once shared with her. Or maybe, just maybe, this darkness had always been there. Nestled in her bloodline, like a serpent coiled around a royal crest. She didn't merely kill, she conducted performances. Servants were forced to strip the girls. Elizabeth would inspect their skin like a butcher inspecting veal. They bore scars or imperfections, they were dismissed. She only wanted purity, innocence, virginal blood. Sometimes the chambers would flood. Not with water, but with blood, seeping into stone cracks, staining the earth. Witnesses would later describe iron cages suspended from the ceiling, in which girls were confined and pierced from below, their blood collected in basins. Elizabeth would step into the basin, let it soak into her flesh. She said it made her feel eternal. But vanity cannot be fed forever. And when the villages ran dry of daughters, she began recruiting from noble families under the guise of education. This was her downfall. One of the girls, the daughter of a minor lord, escaped. Bloodied, half-mad with terror, she fled through the Carpathian woods and reached the court of King Matthias II. And finally, someone listened. Not because they cared, not because justice stirred in their hearts, but because the name Bathory had grown too powerful, and power unchecked is always a threat. An inquiry was launched. But even then, care was taken. The king sent Gyurgy, a high-ranking palatine and former ally of the Bathorys. He was told to investigate, not condemn. And yet, when arrived at Lactus Castle on the night of December 29, 1610, what he found could not be buried. Inside the cold stone walls, the truth lay bare. A girl dead, naked, bloodless, on the slab. Another, still breathing, barely her limbs mangled. Chains, hooks, a journal, opened to the last page, soaked in red ink. Staggered from the chambers, hand to mouth. He had come to investigate. He now bore witness. Elizabeth Bathory was arrested that very night. Not screaming, not crying, but silent. Composed, like a queen seated on a throne of corpses. They never tried her. Let that sink in. Elizabeth Bathory, the Blood Countess, the Lady of Lactus, predator of innocence, never stood before a court, never faced a jury. No cross-examinations, no verdict, no gallows. Why? Because power protects its own. Because if you put a Bathory on trial, the entire noble house trembles. And kings, too, fear the tremors that follow truth. Instead, the court turned its eyes toward the expendable. Her accomplices for servants. Loyal or too terrified to disobey became scapegoats for a horror none of them could have authored alone. Ilona, her trusted nursemaid. Dorothea, Čachtice, the cruel overseer. Fichko, the disfigured dwarf who obeyed without question. And, the youngest, trembling, barely a child herself when taken into service. They confessed, some under torture, others through sobs and madness. Ilona claimed Elizabeth would laugh when blood touched her skin, calling it the river of youth. Dorothea described a contraption made of iron. shaped like a maiden, with spikes that pierced slowly. Fichko said, "Nothing, only wept." And she whispered. She said we were feeding her soul. The court sentenced them quickly. Some were beheaded, others their fingers torn with hot pincers before death. Youth spared her execution, but not her mind. She disappeared into a convent and into silence. But what of Elizabeth? They walled her in. Yes, welled. In a cold tower chamber of Lactus Castle, the masons sealed her behind stone and mortar. No door. One slit for air. Another for food. A noble tomb for the living dead. She became a myth in real time, a specter entombed within the castle she had defiled. Inside, she was given no mirror, no candle. Only time. Days blurred. Then weeks. Then months. She scribbled on the walls with blood from her fingers, etching prayers or curses no one could tell. Sometimes guards reported her singing lullabies. Other nights they heard sobbing. Sometimes nothing at all. In her final letter smuggled out, or perhaps forged, for even documents feared the truth, she wrote, "I have not sinned. I have only aged." And that is the cruelest crime of all. She died 4 years later. In 1614, the servant who passed food through the slit found the tray untouched for 3 mornings in a row. The room was unsealed. Elizabeth lay on the stone, eyes open, mouth parted mid-whisper, mid-lie, mid-curse. She looked ... peaceful. And that, perhaps, is the greatest horror. They say time buries all things. But some names claw their way through the centuries like a whisper behind a closed door, like a stain no fire can cleanse. Elizabeth Bathory, was she a monster, or merely the mirror held to a monstrous age? After her death, the walls of Lactus stood silent for a time. Ivy crept over the stones. Peasants whispered prayers when passing by. Children dared one another to touch the castle gates, then ran screaming at their own echoes. But legends thrive where truth is too terrible to tell plainly. Some claimed that Elizabeth's spirit still wandered the corridors, her fingers dripping red, seeking new skin to wear. Others believed the land itself had turned barren, cursed by the blood she spilled. No crops grew, no birds sang. A few swore they had seen her, a pale figure standing in the tower slit, even decades after her death. But beneath the ghost stories lies something far more chilling: the legacy of impunity. The Bathory name remained. Her family kept lands, titles, dignity. The king never returned the letters she wrote in her final years. The church erased her from records, but not from fear. And yet her story survived, not because it was preserved, but because it was too grotesque to ignore. Too perfect a morality tale. A tale of power corrupted by vanity. Of beauty twisted into obsession. Of pain hidden behind perfume and silk. Modern scholars still debate the details. Was she truly guilty of the hundreds of murders? Or was she the victim of a political conspiracy framed by those who envied her vast fortune? Some point to the fact that the testimonies came from tortured mouths, that no bodies were ever exhumed, that the only trial was silence. And yet the smell of blood lingers in history's hallways. Because whether she killed 2 or 200, Elizabeth Bathory became a symbol, a warning. She reminds us that cruelty often wears noble garb. Not monsters don't always come with claws, but with crowns and corsets and cold smiles. She is the whisper in the mirror when vanity becomes hunger. The reflection that asks not, "Am I beautiful?" but "What would I do to remain so?" And that question, dark, primal, honest, is why we still speak her name, not to honor her, not even to condemn her, but to remember that inside every empire, every lineage, every throne, there are rooms with no doors and stories that never end, only echo. If shadows like these stir something within you, if the echoes of forgotten horrors call to your curiosity, then let your journey not end here. Like this tale if it chilled your bones. Share it with those who dare walk these halls of history. And share and subscribe Chanel Bloody History so you do not miss the next chapter, because the past is never truly buried, only waiting to be unearthed.